This video is a walkthrough of how to extract data from Salesforce using the Salesforce data loader utility in command line mode. I did an earlier version of this video 5 years ago. Since that time, there's been some updates to the data loader utility and to the prerequisites required to run the data loader. The data loader utility uses a configuration file to run. If you go to flyingpuma.com, you can download a sample configuration file that you can modify and use on your own. Here at Flying Puma, if you scroll down, there's a link here that says extracting Salesforce data using the data loader command line. And if you go there, you'll see this page and there's a download button. This will download a zip file that contains a sample configuration file as well as a batch file that can be used to run the download if you want to add this to like Windows Task Scheduler or something like that. So head over to flyingpuma.com and download the sample files. There are some prerequisites to running the data loader on your PC, and at the link shown on the screen at help.salesforce.com, there's an article that describes the prerequisites. This page shows the requirements to run the data loader. It starts with the system requirements for Windows. I'm going to be running this on a machine that's running Windows 11, so even though this indicates Windows 10, this does run on Windows 11. It also indicates that you need to have a Java runtime environment, and I will show you that. And then I'm going to make note of something else here, and it says the data loader command line interface is supported for Windows only. So if you're running this on a non-Windows machine, you're not going to be able to run this in the command line mode. The first prerequisite to running the data loader is to have a Java runtime environment. So if you don't already have that loaded on your PC, you can use the Java runtime environment that's at azul.com, and I'll show you that. If you go to azul.com and the downloads page, there's this Azul builds of OpenJDK. This will work. You can download that and install it. A note about the installation: when you install the Java runtime environment, you want to set the Java home variable. In the documentation at Salesforce, they have a screenshot here that shows this same setup, but they don't show setting the Java home variable. The other prerequisite to running the data loader is obviously the data loader utility itself. And to download the data loader utility, it can be found in Salesforce Setup if you search for data loader. At the time that I'm doing this video, the current release is version 59. If you go into Salesforce into Setup and use the quick find box, you can type in data loader and it will show you a link. This is what that download page looks like, and here you will find the download for the current version of the data loader. So those are the prerequisites to running the data loader. I recommend installing your Java environment first. In fact, I believe that the data loader utility installation will check for that before it installs. Before we go any further, I'm going to show you what it is that I'm going to extract as a demonstration in this video. I'm going to go into Salesforce. In Salesforce, I have an object here called widgets, and I'll show you that. This is the data that's in that. I have a widget name, a record ID, description, contact, create date, and I just have 3 records here. If I go into the setup in Salesforce, I can show you the design of that object. And these are the fields, so there's very minimal fields here. There's just the contact created by ID, a description field, last modified, the owner ID, and a name. These are the fields that I'm going to extract in this video. So let's get started. The first step in extracting data from Salesforce using the data loader command line is to create an encryption key, and with that create an encrypted password. I mentioned earlier in this video that there are files that can be downloaded from flyingpuma.com. If you download that zip file and look in it, there's this process-conf.xml file. That is the configuration file that's used by the data loader utility. When we create an encryption key and an encrypted password, we are going to save those in that configuration file. So to create an encryption key and the encrypted password, I'm going to go out to a command prompt. And if you're not familiar with getting to the command prompt, click on the start button and just simply start typing in the word command. It will show you the command prompt as an option. If you click on that, it will open up a window that looks similar to this. When I installed the data loader utility, I installed it in a folder or directory called data loader right in my C drive. And within that folder, I created a subfolder called data exports. That is where I am going to save the exports. And that is also where I'm saving my configuration file. I'm going to open up my configuration file with just a plain text editor like Notepad. And it looks like this. You can see here that there's a place for me to enter my encrypted password and also for where I can enter the path to our encryption key. I'm going to keep this configuration file open in Notepad while I work in the command prompt to create the encryption key and the encrypted password. So to create an encryption key, at the command prompt, I'm going to start by changing to the directory where the executables are stored for the data loader. In my case, it's the data loader /v59/bin directory. After I go to that directory, I'm going to type in a command, and that command is encrypt followed by a -k handle, and then I'm going to type in a full path to where I want to save my encryption key. And in my case, I'm going to save it in the data loader /data exports directory, and I'm going to name the file key.txt. And when I hit enter on this, you can see that it creates the key.txt file. It creates this file right here. The next step is to encrypt our password using that key. And to do that, I'm going to start by typing in that same command, encrypt, but now I'm going to use a -e handle, and then I'm going to enter in my password. And I don't mean enter my password, I mean enter in your credentials that you use to get into Salesforce. Whatever your password is, enter that here. And then I'm going to follow that by the full path of where the encryption key is stored. And I'm going to hit enter on that. And then it creates this string. That is our encrypted password. So back in our configuration file, you can see here that I've already made a change and that I've added the full path to where our encryption key is saved. In my case, the data loader, data exports directory, and the name of the encryption file is key.txt. And now I'm going to add the encrypted password. So I'm going to copy this entire string, and then I'm going to paste that in where all these zeros are in my configuration file. And I'm going to make sure at the end of this that there's not an extra space, and you can see that it's enclosed in quotes. So that's how I create an encryption key and an encrypted password, and this is where it gets saved in the configuration file. Now that we've added the encryption key and the password to the configuration file. The second step is to finish editing the configuration file and add the rest of the parameters necessary to extract our widgets object. I'm going to start by pointing out the login ID. This is where we just added the password, and right above that you can see here's where our username goes. And so I've got this filled in with you at your email sign in, so you will change that to be whatever your sign in ID is for your Salesforce instance. I'll go to the top of this configuration file and I'll go through it. It starts with assigning a bean ID, and in this case I've called it extract widgets. This also has a property name of extract widgets. That is actually used with the command line utility to tell what process is run from this configuration file. So I give it a name of extract widgets. Below that, we provide the URLs to where Salesforce is hosted and where we log in. If your organization has a custom URL, a custom domain name for its Salesforce instance, this will be different for you. For me, I'm just simply using salesforce.com. Below the path to the encryption file, there are some default settings, a timeout and batch size setting and things like that. These are simply the defaults that were in the sample from Salesforce. I have not changed those. On this next line, we tell it what it is that we're going to extract. In my case, we're extracting the widget object, and this has that _C indicating that it's a custom object. And then below that, we add a Salesforce object query language query. This is where we tell it what fields we're going to select and where we're selecting them from. So I want to show you a quick way of generating this query. If you open up the regular version of the data loader, not the command line, but just run the data loader in Windows, after you log in, it looks like this. I'm going to click on Export. And after I click on Export, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to choose the widget object. It says here, choose a target for extraction, and I'm just going to call that widgets. .csv, and I'm going to choose next. And then when I choose next, it gives me this query builder. If I click on select all fields, it builds a Salesforce object select query that contains all the fields, and then I can uncheck ones if I don't want them all. So I'll select those fields, and I'm going to highlight this and copy it. I'm hitting Control-C here to put it on my clipboard, and I'm going to go back to my process config file, and I'm going to paste that in here. And I'm going to make sure that I don't have an extra space at the end of this. So that's a way of creating that query. You don't have to just type it out. You can use the data loader utility itself to build that query for you. And then I'm going to go back into this and cancel this and close the data loader so it's not running in the background. After I've entered in my Salesforce object query language query, I tell it what this operation is going to do. In this case, we're going to run an extract, so the value is extract. And then I provide it with a full path to where we want to save the extract. In my case, it's in the data loader directory, the data export subdirectory, and then the file name is going to be widgets.csv. And then the final entry here in our configuration file, we tell the configuration how it is that we access that file, and this is going to be a write method, so it's CSV write. And that's it. This is the configuration file to extract the fields out of the widget object in Salesforce. We save that and then we'll run it. The final step in extracting the data is to run the process from the command line and then optionally to create a batch file. So back at the command line, I'm going to clear my screen here. I'm going to make sure that I'm in the directory where the executables for the data loader are stored. And in my case, that's the data loader v59 bin directory. And then within this directory, I'm going to type a command. And that command is process followed by the path where I have saved the configuration file. So I don't have to name the configuration file, but I just provide the path to the configuration file. And then I provide the process name within that configuration file that I want to run. In this case, it's extract widgets. And that's it. This right here, process.bat, followed by the path to the configuration file, followed by the name of the process within the configuration file, is the command line to run the data loader. I'm going to hit enter here. After a little bit of time, it returns to a command prompt, and you can see at the bottom here it says the operation has fully completed. There are 3 successful extractions and 0 errors. If I go to my data exports directory and look, I now have additional files here that weren't there before. There's a log file, there's a config properties file, there's a last run file, and then right here is widgets.csv. I'm going to open this up in Notepad, and there we go. There's my data from Salesforce extracted into a CSV file. So that's it. That is how you extract data from Salesforce using the data loader from the command line. Now, running this from the command line and having to type out this every time, is not ideal. If I want to put this into like Windows Task Scheduler and set up an automated task to do this or something like that, it's easier if I put this in a batch file. So included in the files from flyingpuma.com, there is this runexport.bat, and I've copied that to my data exports folder. I'll open that up so you can see what that looks like. And you can see that I have the same commands in this batch file. I changed to the data loader bin directory, and then I have that same exact command here. So now instead of running at the command line and typing all this out, I can simply double click on the batch file. I'm going to delete these extra files here, including the extract, and then I'm going to run this batch file so you can see what that looks like. And once it finishes, that window closes, and again, it has created a CSV file. I'll open that up, and there again is that same data. So I can run that from a batch file. For the rest of this video, I'm going to give just a couple of tips on troubleshooting. The first tip that I'm going to give is that if you're running this from the batch file, if there's an error, that command prompt window will close and you won't be able to see what the error is. Well, there's a simple solution to this. If you edit this batch file, you can make 2 changes. The first change is right before you issue the command to run the process.bat, do a call. Make it so that this process, this batch file, calls that batch process. And then at the end of this, put in a pause. And the effect of this is then it's going to run these commands. It's going to change to that directory. It's going to run the process.bat. And then it's going to pause. And it's going to have that message on the screen that says hit any key to continue. That will give you the opportunity to scroll up, so to speak, and see what the errors are. Without that, that screen disappears and you can't see what the error is. So that's my first tip. The second tip that I'll give you here has to do with a very common error, and that is when you run it, you will get this message that says the login must use a security token. The issue here is that the IP address of the computer that I'm using to run this process is not within the trusted range in Salesforce. If I go into Salesforce Setup and use the quick find and type in the word network, I can pull up the network access settings. If I add the IP address or a range of IP addresses that includes the IP address of the computer that I'm running the data loader from, that error will go away. When you're done troubleshooting and everything's working for you, be sure to remember to remove the call and the pause from your batch file so that the process doesn't get stuck on that hit any key to continue. That's it for this video. I hope you found something useful here. Feel free to subscribe. I am planning on doing some more videos in the future, and feel free to leave a comment. Thanks for watching.